So what you drinking there?
So I'm drinking a Peruvian decaf because it's at night and we're at home. But our guest isn't drinking decaf. He's drinking Dunkin' somewhere, probably. But our guest was Nick Heim, and really enjoyed the episode. How did you like the episode?
I really enjoyed it. I think that you two got along well. I enjoyed the aspects where y'all talked about introvert and extrovert, especially in business. And I kind of thought that was funny because he said something like, you don't just get over being an introvert overnight. And I was like, I was born really, really outgoing. What did you find interesting about it?
There were so many things. I learned a lot from Nick. The first thing that I really appreciated was just what his why is, which is one of the emphasis of the show, and how he really is an advocate for the profession, whether that's in his job or whether it's things he's doing on social media. So he wants to lift the profession of engineering. And we have so many introverts that we need people to speak out, to talk about it and share what it is for both the community at large and also the younger people coming up. They'll understand what it is. So that was just a glimpse of what we talked about, but we also talked about so much other things, like one of his heroes that he wants to learn from, another advocate of civil engineering, structural engineering. And we also talked about his job with the innovation field and within the concrete industry. So he works on concrete and repairs of parking garages, but focuses on innovating and improving their workflow so that they can basically be efficient and so forth. So that's really what we talked a lot about today, just innovation in general as well, and so many aspects of that. So I think it's a great episode, and we'll let everybody jump right into it.
All right.
My name is Andy Richardson. I'm a structural engineer. I've been doing this 26 years. I'm still learning so much about the AEC industry. So let's go ahead and listen in to the rest of the episode along with us. Let's jump to the intro.
Welcome to Enhance, an AEC podcast, where we learn the why behind AEC professionals so that you can learn your why.
All right, well, hey Nick, welcome to the Enhance podcast.
Andy, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
And glad to have you in Beaufort.
Beautiful Beaufort, South Carolina. It's about, I'd say, probably 40 degrees warmer than where I came from. So
yeah, how's that working out for you so far?
I love it. The thing about where I'm from is it's about just as humid as it is here, but it's cold. So it's it's bone chilling.
Okay, and you're from
Cleveland, Ohio.
Cleveland, Ohio. Yeah, so it's a little colder there right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Is your wife a little jealous of the pictures that you sent?
Yeah, she is, and she's also a big barbecue fan. So she got a pic of a nice plate from Q on the street.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Q on the bay, right?
Q on Bay, yeah.
So that was probably making her a little bit jealous, but we'll get some when I get home.
Nice, yeah, and it's a little warmer here than even I'm used to for February because we're recording this in early February. But yeah, nonetheless, we enjoyed a lot of our morning today. So yeah, and I mean, it was just great to have you on because you were able to work in a site visit and also jump on the podcast with us. So
absolutely,
I was like, that's going to be really cool because we had a virtual one, but now we've moved to a IRL, which I learned was in real life.
And I mean, there's with as much of a fan as I am of technology, there's really no replacement for doing things face to face.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we were able to sit down and actually get it done IRL.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump onto that first. I guess just the podcast, and I mean, because you have a podcast as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's just interesting to see. Like we talked about the different formats, obviously, but I mean, yours is mostly virtual, and that's a big difference in format, right?
Absolutely, and it makes things easier. And so, to be honest, we haven't had anything in person. Mm-hmm. Been floating the idea of like going to conferences and doing it there. Nothing yet, but it definitely makes for a different experience.
Yeah. And I'm the opposite. So we actually had our first podcast scheduled. It was virtual, and I didn't quite have everything set up for that, but I have the setup for the IRL. But anyway, you're actually our first, I believe, our first non-Beaufort person on the show.
So we're taking out of the city, out of the state, even out of the region, right? So
yeah,
coming from a little bit of a different place, even just walking around here, different styles, different architecture,
right?
Probably a little bit of a different mindset. But I've loved my time here, and it's a beautiful town. Like just how laid back and kind and friendly everybody is. Not saying we don't have friendly people back home,
right?
But I'd recommend it. If you've watched Forrest Gump, you may recognize a sight or two.
A few scenes. I showed you a few scenes around here, right?
Oh yeah,
got to see the bridge and a few other things. So, yeah. I mean, so really, this is the Enhanced podcast, and people want to learn from you. People are architects, engineers, contractors, and even people that aren't those. It's just people that are watching from the sideline as far as what is the AEC industry all about, but mostly from the AEC industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you bring a unique perspective. You're an engineer. You have some innovation aspects that you work on with your company. You do the innovation podcast, and so you have a lot of things I think people could learn from. So I sometimes throw a curveball out there to begin the podcast. So this is your curveball that I'm throwing at you.
Shoot.
If you were to spend a day with like an engineer or an inventor
mm-hmm.
from any time frame, who would you want to spend that with?
Man, so that's a great question, and I'd actually say as of late, Ashraf. Ashraf is the kind of the founder and owner of CSI, Computers and Structures Inc. So
right,
we've all used SAP, ETABS, and everything, but from the outside looking in, just seems like somebody who's a great engineer, a great entrepreneur, really cares about the industry, the future, the students, doing what he can to make everything successful. And coming from a similar background, combining engineering and technology, I mean, that's somebody that like I see there's not too many, I would say. There's a couple that come to mind, but of the few, I mean, he would be, somebody I'd love to just get to know better and kind of understand kind of his story and just how the man works.
Yeah, I mean, have you met him at all? Okay.
So Ashraf, if you're listening, just come on the show. I'll visit you. You visit me. It'll be a good time.
Okay, yeah, get him on your podcast, or maybe get him on this one too, right?
That's two birds with one stone, right?
Yeah, and I love the things that he brings up as far as his marketing, and he's not marketing his company as much as he's marketing the field of engineering, mm-hmm. the industry, and showing the world what we're doing. We're keeping, we're enhancing, but also we're ensuring safety.
Mm-hmm.
That's what engineers do, and so he's really highlighting that.
Yeah, and he brings up some really good points where, for example, it's like a real estate agent can come and sell a building multiple times, or a broker, whoever the case may be, and they get cut of that deal each single time. Well, you go and design something, right? You get your design fee once, you're liable for this thing for its for the rest of its service life, right? And it's crazy to think like that, but that's just the way our profession is structured. So he's done a really good job of educating the lay people of what we do, and how the industry works. Although, there's always more to do, but it's great to have a voice like his kind of supporting like what we do as a profession.
Yeah, definitely. And get excited about, I mean, he just seems like a fun guy.
Yeah, Ashraf and the All-Stars, man. Have you seen his bands at some of these things? I haven't been to one personally, but I've seen some of the videos and have talked to people who have been there. And it's crazy, right? Because structural engineers were not exactly the most extroverted profession, but look what he's able to do and bring all these brilliant people together and have some fun with it.
Yeah.
Just like the gentleman who told, on our last site visit, if you're not having fun with it, something's wrong.
What's the point?
That's it.
I mean, we chose our profession. Like, we don't have to do this, right? No. Maybe some days we have to finish what we start, I guess. But So yeah, I mean, and we talked about like the introvert piece a little bit earlier today. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this about me. I am, because I do a lot of LinkedIn posting. You do a lot of LinkedIn posting, and we're like on podcasts, so people are like, oh, they're like extroverts, but I'm not. I mean,
Same.
it's very like I'll pay for this later. We talked about that too.
And it's an acquired skill. It just doesn't happen like that overnight.
Yeah.
I mean, same thing with engineering school, right? It's like none of us were born as engineers. We might have been, like attracted to that or have a certain way about us, but it took, training and time in the field to get to where we are today. And it's the same thing, whether it be sales or marketing, business development, or anything that's, more typically considered to be of an extrovert than an introvert.
Right. I mean, the thing that an introvert brings in to sales and marketing, for one thing, is that dedicated thought, right? Like you're going to spend time thinking about, okay, what am I going to say in a sales situation or a marketing situation? Or obviously in engineering, it's very helpful because you can focus on a task for an extended period of time, typically. So, I mean, there's definitely some benefits to it. But yeah, I like that it's an acquired skill to do things like this. So going back to your, like, the time machine a little bit, to your history and your background, and just starting out in civil engineering degree, like what got you going with that?
It's a great question. And so taking it back in the day, so when I was in kindergarten, man, I loved playing with, so it was like blocks and trains and computers. And I remember my parents saying, like, yeah, we used to tell you, you'd be an engineer or whatever. And it kind of showed. And then when I was like a junior in high school, we had this career day at a local college, an institute of technology. And I remember them having this, like, it was like bridge simulation software. So you could build your little bridge and then drive the truck over and like see how everything held up, and it would fall and your truck would like go into the water. And that was like, I think those two in tandem, like that early experience, with all the toys and math and science, and then kind of right towards the end of my high school career, like showing like what the possibilities are. And I think that's really what led me into civil engineering.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Awesome. And so you went into civil engineering, you obviously got your degree, and then went to this engineering field. So, and practiced as an engineer for a few years. So how long have you been doing that?
Yeah, so my career started in 2017, so it'll be coming up on 8 years later this year.
Wow, cool. That's the same year as I started my 2096.
There you go.
It's a interesting year.
2017. It was a good year to be an engineer.
Yeah, but so you did that, and then how long did you practice? Like, well, can you tell me about like what you did as a practicing engineer?
Yeah, so like Cleveland's a market that is not, I would say, it's not booming with new development. But there's a lot of existing building stock that needs to be maintained. So if you're living in Cleveland, like odds are you're going to touch the restoration field at some point. So I started off doing forensics and restoration, and that's pretty much what I did, for my entire career. And I was with, two firms prior to the company I'm with now. But I realized that although engineering, like I enjoyed the time and the field work and everything, there was like kind of like an itch to scratch and something I knew I wanted to do within like the field, but that's just a little bit different than like what a typical practicing structural or restoration or forensic engineer does.
Mm-hmm. So you had an itch. I mean, like you were doing engineering and it was just something else. And what was that?
Yeah, and so it goes back to my first job right out of college, and we were actually going to do, it was a roof inspection, and the principal handed me, it was a digital camera, pen and paper, and I'm sitting there like trying to figure out where I am on this thing and write notes and take pictures. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing in the world. Like, I was like, there's got to be a better way. And I was very fortunate because at that same firm, I had two really good mentors who supported me in that pursuit. And that's kind of where my love for like, let's call it like, so like innovation or technology, like specifically within the field of like structural engineering, restoration, and forensics, I would say came from.
Mm-hmm. From that, yeah. And so this digital camera, like, did something come of that, or the project you were working on, did something come of that, like an idea, or?
Yeah, and so the idea was, it was less specifically about like that job or that process. It's just that ingrained mentality of like, I've heard it like, if you ever listen to Ed Milet, he calls it, I think it's blissful dissatisfaction, like being grateful for what you have, but also striving to do more. And it was like, I was grateful for the opportunity, grateful for the people teaching me, even if I like didn't necessarily agree with their methods, but always looking to take that next step and do things better, and not so much differently, because I'm always a fan of like, if it's not broke, don't break it. Like there are some reasons like why things are done and there's no need to change it. But for a lot of different scenarios, there is a different and better way of doing things.
Yeah. I really like that quotation too, about the blissful dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we can always improve something, right? I mean, I call it, we like to spend a lot of time on innovation at 2096 as well, but we're learning what that means, how to do it, so forth. But you basically have a dedicated innovation role, is what I think I understand.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And so what I do is just in support of our business objectives. So it's, there's a reason that we actually do innovation. It's not just to go chase shiny objects. It's not to play with the new and greatest toy. I mean, I love doing that, don't get me wrong, but there's got to be a reason, right? Like we don't go into business just to putz around. So it's tied to like very specific objectives we're trying to meet, whether that's business objectives or serving the client or making an existing process better. So, I like to say we have external stakeholders, we have internal stakeholders. So external are just, clients that are the ones that are paying you money to run your business. And then internal could be engineers, it could be project managers, salespeople. So we serve on like our innovation team a lot of different types of roles and people, but it's always with some end objective in mind.
Now, is that end objective always money?
No, it's not. It often is tied to some financial outcome, but there are others that, let's say, maybe you're saving time, but that's not time that you're going to build back, but it's a quality of life thing, right? I ultimately think it, like things like that end up positively impacting the bottom line, but the like the first order objective isn't always money.
Mm-hmm. What's an example of one, maybe?
Yeah, so we'll say like one that definitely drives to the bottom line is like, if you're going to a parking garage, right? The way we used to do it is the engineer would show up on site with, pen, paper, a tape, and a wheel. And they're just sketching this outline out, right? Taking measurements. Half a day goes by. Now they're ready to start their inspection. Well, now we have a workflow that actually cuts all of that out. So they show up to site with a set of, let's say, floor plans so they can actually start their inspection, right? Then you figure, how many projects do we do a year? How many hours a project are we saving? So on and so forth. And this is whether or not like our client provides us with that information. So we just have, a variety of techniques that we've developed over time to like make that process work.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a big time saver, which, I mean, a lot of times they are directly tied to money, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, I mean, that aside, if it didn't save money, sometimes there's a frustration component.
Quality of life.
Yeah. I mean, like for me as an engineer, I've gotten burned out of certain tasks, or like beam sizing, for example, or something like that over the years. Like, how many times can you do the same exact task?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a point at which innovation can help eliminate some of that. Right?
And I like, it's getting the tedious and mundane off of the plates of our very talented engineers as much as possible, right? You go to engineering school to do engineering. You didn't go to engineering school to, for example, go drag a chain and go sound concrete, right? It's a part of the job.
Yeah.
But if there's ways we can reduce or eliminate those types of tedious and mundane tasks, I think we're really doing our fellow engineer a great service.
Yeah. Okay. Now, now we've talked a lot about engineers, but I mean, your podcast is, I think it's just AEC industry, right? It's the A and the C. We don't want to leave them out, right?
No, absolutely not. And to be fair, right, like it's, the podcast is hosted by the Engineering Management Institute, which, its roots are in civil engineering, right?
Sure.
So there's of course, I don't want to say bias, but inherently geared towards civil engineers. So while we're definitely not leaving out the A or the C, because I think the themes can go across the entire industry and even industries outside of ours. I noticed at one point there wasn't a great place for practicing engineers to go and say, I bet there's a better way to do this. I just don't know how, right? And to help them start their research and start their process of like getting to where they think they can go, and just doing what we can to help them along the way.
Yeah. Okay. But definitely the concept of, innovating and improving isn't isolated to the engineering field. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, but what I would also say is there's just not a lot of people out there, like for the most part, like helping our industry. Like there's a lot of construction technology, and I would say of the AE and the C, there's definitely a lot more targeted at the C. And there's a number of reasons why I think that is, but like our fellow engineer, I would say, in certain like domains of what we do isn't quite there yet. If we're talking like CAD and Revit and a lot of these design tools, I think we've got that pretty well covered. Whether, you agree that it's fully fleshed out is like a different discussion. But specifically like the niches that I've worked in, I've noticed there's a lot of room for improvement. So it's just, it's just doing what we can to like help our profession.
So we have to, as the A and the E, we almost have to do it ourselves, is what I'm hearing. I mean, you have to find, but not everybody can have a full timer. Like what do people like me, maybe a 20-person firm or less, do in that situation?
Yeah. So what I recommend is don't go out and spend a bunch of money before you know what you're trying to accomplish. So it's always starting with like the business objectives or the why. Like, is it a process? Is it people? Like, what are you ultimately trying to accomplish as like part of your innovation strategy? Problems worth solving is one way to put it. And then it's going out to find solutions, right? Like, is it something that, can you do it for free with something you're already doing now, right? Can you buy some simple off-the-shelf software, right? Do you need to go build something yourself? I think that's not practical for a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. And part of that is it's just the free content that, like the Engineering Management Institute puts out. So people can like they can do their own research specific to their problem. And then if they ever want to hop on a call or get some consulting, they can at least come armed and not spend a bunch of time and money on something they're not even clear about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does actually. So yeah, it's good ideas to consider if you want to improve. And then there might be some people that in any three of those that say, well, why bother? I mean, what would you say to them?
Yeah, and I'd say, it's really up to you, because I mean, I've run into a number of like those type of people, but they're the ones who know their business is best, right? Like I'm not going to go here and tell someone who's been in the business for 30 or 40 years, like the way they're doing it's wrong. I might be able to help them do something more efficiently, but it's ultimately your business. Like it's your baby. It's like whatever you want to do with it. We're just here to help if and when the time's right.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So I want to switch gears a little bit just for fun. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, right?
Have some fun. Well, I mean, we say that we like to laugh, we like to learn, and we like to inspire. That's my goal is in a podcast. So, so I know you like to do that, and we met on LinkedIn. So I noticed you've put a lot of good material out there for parking garages and innovation, but also you like to have a little fun. Put a meme or two out there. So, what's your favorite meme? I guess right now.
Man, so engineering wise, there's one, I don't remember what movie it's from, but it's like they're in a church and there's 3 people in a row, and the first guy has got a gun to the back of his head that's held by the second guy, and the second guy's got a gun held to the back of his head by a third person, and then up where the choir would be or whatever behind, there's a guy with a sniper, and it's typically goes something like, the first guy's like us, the engineer, and then the architect's holding a gun up to our head, and then a contractor's holding a gun up to the architect's head, and then there's the sniper, which is the developer. And I just laugh because it's just like, how many times have you just been downstream of something and like you just had no control over it, but it just kind of is what it is, and you just have to deal with like the result of it. And I found that actually posted, like not where I work currently, but a previous firm, just like on the bulletin board, and like every time I see it, it makes me laugh.
Yeah, nice. That's a good one. I haven't seen that one, so maybe I'll.
We'll get a B-roll up, show that one. I'll send it to you. It'll give everybody a visual who's watching.
Yeah, we got a YouTube version of it too. If you're just an Apple or Spotify person, check out the YouTube sometime. But yeah, that's a pretty funny one. And there was one that we that I think you shared with me. I liked. It was, you live in the age of AI and showers and you complain.
Yeah, and I think, what's his name? Ruben, I think.
Oh, Ruben Hassid.
Yeah. I believe I saw that from him, and I had to laugh, man, because one, to me, it's like, every day I wake up, it's just being grateful to be alive and have the opportunity, right? And like all the good in the world, as much as it's easy to get caught up in the bad, and like, don't get me wrong, I do that too, for sure. It's like just human nature, but the saying is right. It's like, like we've had hot showers for, as long as plumbing's been around. It's something to be grateful for, and you can figure that out next time your water heater fails, right? How much you miss it. But then in the age of AI, it's like, it's like unreal how much better, I would say, it's made work, and like work-life balance and all, by just being able to be more efficient. But if you're somebody who doesn't care to experiment with it, or doesn't really think it has any value, you'll just never know what you're missing out on, if anything.
Yeah. Wow, it's kind of like you never experienced a hot shower.
It's like, what are we, cavemen out here?
But yeah, it's a good one, and I think about that I think about that meme a lot. Like when I take a shower, I'm like, you live in the age of AI and showers, and you still complain. But because people that like we had a guest here this week, Robert DeLoach, and he's 98 years old. So he probably grew up and didn't take hot showers.
He may have even been in the outhouse, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we'd have to ask him.
Yeah. So, and I've got some of the notes from him. So it made me think about the fact that, because we did talk about technology with Robert, and he does like me to call him Robert, by the way, because he's like, Mr. DeLoach, it was my father.
But let's talk about like just having respect for like the people in the generation that laid the groundwork. Like, if like I said, like, I'm not going to disrespect that 30 or 40 year industry veteran because of the wealth of knowledge that they bring. I'm just going to try to offer like the expertise that I have that they may or probably don't have, just because like what we're able to do today wasn't possible. Like, 30, 40, or in Robert's case, what do you think, like 50 plus years ago?
He started his career in 1950.
So we're talking 70 years ago, 75 years ago. So it's all about respect. And like I said, I've had mentors of all different ages, and one in particular that has been in the game a while, right? Mid to late 60s. Dude's as sharp as a tack, and he's taught me a lot about like what I know because he's so innovative. So like age isn't really a barrier to innovation. I think it's all about mindset, but at the same time, like, you know, it's just about respect, and not just because somebody's not using the latest and greatest or whatever, like doesn't mean you don't still respect everything they bring to the table.
Right. I mean, that's what they know. You know, I mean, I have, you know, I've told you about our RG.
RG, man. Love the acronyms.
So I'm an acronym guy, right? But RG means retired guy. And David is one of our engineers. And, you know, I think he's probably like late 60s, early 70s, but he's got so much vast knowledge of experience that I can gain from. And he's seen things I haven't even thought about before in his lifetime. And he's also just very detailed. So so I guess just a quick tip to consider is we have these people that are RGs in your life. They might be available to help you out with your company, whether you're an architecture, engineering, or construction company, and they're just sitting around playing shuffleboard. But maybe we can keep them busy, and a lot of these people want to stay busy. So just an idea for the audience to consider. I mean, I've found value in that because maybe they're retired and they just want to come back and spend 10 hours or 20 hours a week to help out and provide value to an AEC company. So something to consider.
It's all like all the younger engineers, you know, and I would say I have a couple of people like this in my life where they're just glad that you took the time to pick up the phone and call them. And like selfishly, right? It's like, it's free mentorship. Like these people are amazing. And like, I would echo like everything they know, like they've forgotten more than I know to this point. And just being able to like tap into a resource like that it's crazy. You know, and here's another example. I don't know if you've heard about this one, Andy, but Thorne Tomasetti, with, you know, the permission of this individual, it was a renowned welding engineer. They actually basically built like it's almost like an artificial digital twin of this gentleman, you know, combing through his records, interviews with him, right? And this was all done like with his grace and permission before he passed away. And even today, like I was told, you can like ask questions, and like his kind of like, you know, his artificial representation will answer. And I mean, it's kind of like a way to leave a legacy that, you know, was that even possible like 5 years ago?
Wow, that's crazy.
And then thinking about, and there's other, I think, like institutions I've heard of, like museums, for example, doing this, where you can like go chat with like a World War I vet that they've maybe done a similar process with. But just having your legacy be able to live on, you know, respectfully, of course, with the individual's permission, I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that idea. It's almost like a specific kind of AI, like a welding engineer GPT.
And then I would say the alternative to that is like, if it's not for you as either a company or an individual, just figure out a different way to do knowledge transfer and leave a legacy.
Yeah. I mean, it's about effort. It's about focus. What do you want to, if you're on the mentee side or the mentor side, what do you want to give back to the younger generation? Or if you're younger, what do you want to learn? I mean, you have to ask the questions sometimes, right? Like,
and even on the mentee side, it's like, what can you give or provide to like make the relationship even more valuable to your mentor, right? Because so many times you think of it as a one-way street from mentor to mentee. But in my case, like as I was learning the ropes in a profession that's been around for a while, like there were certain things that I knew and understood that my mentors really just didn't. So I was able to, in return for like their advice and their wisdom, give them something back. And I mean, that could be technology, it could be social media, mostly stuff that they probably wouldn't have had the chance to learn. And then by the time they've gotten to the role they're in, it's like, you know, you do what you're good at, and maybe acquiring some of these skills isn't like top of the list. So having somebody to help you along, I think, goes a long way.
now your company that you're at now is fully remote?
we've got an HQ, and like you'll get people in the office that are local to that area, but otherwise fully remote.
Like you're remote.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the reason I asked is, what is the impact of that on this conversation about mentorship?
I'd say you have to be intentional about, one, getting the mentorship virtually, and then two, like scheduling time to actually be mentored in person. Because, if I come into our HQ, right, like everybody's like, they're not like dropping everything because I'm coming in, right? Like they've got jobs to, they've got lives to live. So it's like, hey, I'm coming out on such and such date. Like, can we set up a one-on-one? Can we set up a coffee? Can we do X, Y, and Z, right? So like you have to be intentional about it, and you have to want to actually do it, because it doesn't come as naturally as like, every engineering office. It's like, hey, 22-year-old engineer, let me pull you in and show you kind of like what we're doing and working together on projects and getting that natural flow of mentorship. It's a very intentional doing.
Yeah, I like that, the intentionality, and even, just setting up specific calendar times or whatever, whether it's in person or maybe it's virtual times, right? So I wanted to go back to the Robert thing for a minute.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It was just like it was an interesting contrast between the technology that he has seen over the years, right? Like he talked about his slipstick. Do you know what a slipstick is?
I do not.
It's a slide rule. That's what they called it.
They called the slide rule slipsticks. Okay.
Yeah, so that was a funny little thing that I learned, but I mean that's what he used. He's like, you can do anything with a slipstick that you can with the calculator you have. I'm like, okay, but so that's what he used, hand drawings. But then he knows what Revit, like he understands Revit. He understands the value of Revit, AutoCAD, and I mean he saw all of it, and he just retired 5 years ago. So, but the point, and he saw computers come in, right? Like so, and he even talked about like the bag phone, like so. But this just seems like a contrast between that and some of the things that you're using, and AI, etc. Can you relate to that contrast, or maybe speak to that contrast a little bit?
Yeah. So the quote, I can't remember what grade scientist it was, but it's like, I've only gotten to where I am by standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of groundwork laid here to make any of this possible, right? Like, and it's come in phases and steps, but there's a certain way of like just technology we use out in the field, right? A phone or an iPad. Well, that whole suite of applications and software doesn't get developed without some guy basically getting the supercomputer in our pockets, right? And that doesn't come about without, and you can trace it all the way back to Robert and even before his time. So I think you have to realize that like everything we do today is possible because somebody else took the time and pushed us forward that came before us. And if you look at technology over time, like, and how things have been moving, particularly over, I'd say, the past like 20 to 25 years, it's like the progress just gets crazier and crazier.
Yeah.
So maybe like I want to say maybe like the bigger difference is just the rate of change that we're seeing. And I'd be curious to ask Robert, it's like, if you chunked, your career from 1950 to 2020, it's like, if you plotted that rate of change, like what did it look like? Was it relatively flat until we started getting the internet? Like what speed of change did you see, and how do you like compare that to like, what's admittedly not an easy thing to keep up with today?
Yeah, that would be an interesting. Maybe we'll have a follow-up interview with him.
Yeah, yes.
So yeah, because even the other thing that is interesting about the conversation, I think, and I'm 48, so I see like the benefit of analog and what my experience with the pen and paper. I mean, we didn't, we're just starting to see Bluebeam in the past 3 years. Well, I mean, at our company, and I did red lines by hand. So I did that for my whole career, red lines, and even like the calculations would all be by hand, or like the jobs that we do that are hand calcs would be like by hand, and the drawings are a lot of by hand, at least on the red line side. But now, in 3 years ago, we started using Bluebeam. So it's just interesting to me because I can see the value that I gained from the analog and learning, and the connection between the paper and the mind and the growth. And then now the engineers that are coming through are just like on Bluebeam. And so is there a piece missed from that? Or if that question makes sense at all, do you see the benefit of the analog versus the digital at times?
I do. Yeah, and I actually just ran a post like this where there are drawbacks to digital, and you could say analog is agile because, think about, let's say, like trying to do a quick hand sketch versus doing something like in CAD, right? Like, the stroke of the pen, very free flowing, right? There's a lot more flexibility there versus CAD is kind of like these right commands, and everything is very much like, one thing to the next versus the flow of doing by hand. And there's like, a number of examples I could think of, but I think analog definitely has value. I remember, my first internship was in estimating for a construction company. And the first thing my boss at the time made me do, he was like, hey, like, I know you know how to use like Excel and Bluebeam, but I want you to like do this takeoff by hand. Mm-hmm. And there's an engineer I know who, he thinks that all the time he spent detailing like by hand helped him understand load path intuitively, which I never really thought about because by the time I was starting, like, hand drafting, sketching is different, but hand drafting really just wasn't a thing where I'd worked. And I thought, you know what, that's like a really good point, and I could understand like where he's coming from, like literally like feeling the forces of the structure as you like draw each detail and go through your design. So to answer your question, yeah, I think there's merit to it. It's just at what point do you gain most, if not all, of the benefits of analog, and then turn that into a digital process to just be more efficient?
Right. Yeah, and I'm not necessarily saying, throw Bluebeam in the garbage. I think that's where we are, but it's also, we have to understand where we are so that we can maybe make certain adaptations to that, so that we don't lose too much of the learning process of the old.
And yeah, and what if, if you're, you got an EIT coming in or a young engineer, and they're not going to be productive right away, right? There's going to be a dip. For the first 6 months of the career, do you just have a curriculum set where like, hey, like just throw your computer out because we're doing everything by hand?
Yeah.
and it's not going to be this way forever, but just to teach them like how it feels to do it manually, so then when they take that step to digital from analog, they're reaping the benefits that they may not even be aware of exist.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and that ties right back to the innovation department as far as understanding unintended consequences of innovation, right? Like that's an important aspect of it, I think.
So here's another example, laser scanning, right? Just had a great guest on my podcast. He's actually a surveyor, super knowledgeable. Didn't actually come from the surveying industry. His background, I want to say, was closer to finance, but got into the business and loved it. And one thing we were talking about is, so scanning before, right? Like you might do in the case of engineering, like you take a couple dimensions on a building, right? And you get like essentially the bare minimum amount of information that you need to do your job. You go scan hundreds of thousands or millions of points. Like how do you sort through like what actually means something and what is like information that you have as a result of the process but doesn't really do anything for you, right? Because like in an analog world, like I said, you're like every piece of data you collect in analog is for a specific reason. That's not always the case in digital. So it's like mixing the lessons you learn by doing something manually or analog and then applying it to digital to make the best of both worlds, I think.
Right. It's the why of what you're doing, right? So yeah, obviously that was an intentional segue that I put in there because I think just to sort of bring this in for a landing, but maybe just some final thoughts from you about something that maybe the audience could learn from, as far as if it was an engineering lesson. So if there was one engineering lesson that you could share with the audience, or innovation perhaps, what would that be?
So there's so many, but there are, oh man, so many good ones out there. But also, like, let's say like these like problems worth solving, or like solution in search of a problem, right? Like there's a reason in life and in business that we like do certain things a certain way. And often, like, my advice is like, hey, in innovation, you're trying to like start with the root and like the why you're trying to do something, and then apply the solution and not do it the other way around. So I like to think of that in my life as like, whether it's intentionality or coming up with a plan, but being very specific about like why I do things, or like the meaning or legacy I'm trying to leave behind, or whatever the case may be. But having a reason to just do what you do.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. And what is your reason for doing what you do?
Man, so like family's obviously a big part of it, right? Like we're all trying to like make a living, support our families. But beyond that, I mean, I think like I think like the engineering profession is one that's really, really, like, it's a great place to be, but I don't, for the most part, think people like know what we do. It's like they hear engineer and it's like, oh yeah, dude, what are you out there driving trains or something? Right? Like, and then you think about like what representation do we have like on the national stage? And like, I'm an introvert myself, but I think there's so much great, there's so many great people and lessons and stories out there. And I've just been fortunate to have the opportunity to like be one of the gang, right? Be an engineer, but also the platform to like share what these people know and are doing, and kind of help other people share their story, share their experience and what they do. So from a professional standpoint, I think it's kind of spreading the message about like the industry that we're in, the people that make it up. And, I think it's a great place to be in. And I've thought about this a lot, even more so with the advent of technology and AI, and like how our industry functions is we're not like sheltered or anything like that, but because we're such a relationship in person business or industry, there's a lot to be gained, but there's also that solid core that just, it's kind of like probably the same thing that Robert was doing back in the 50s, right? Shaking hands, kissing babies, meeting people in person.
Yeah, awesome. So, is there anything else you want to talk about today, or share about yourself with the audience?
Man, let me take a look at our little list here.
I mean, if you want to do a plug, this is a good time to do that, or
yeah. So if you are someone in the industry and you're interested in applications of technology or innovation to your business, you can look up the AEC Engineering and Technology podcast. We're up to almost 70 episodes at this point, and it's a wide-ranging variety of topics across AE and C. And it's just, I think, a great resource to get people started on the right foot in whatever you're trying to accomplish. So if you want to take a listen,
okay, awesome.
Find me there.
What's a hot one that you've recently done?
So, man, it's like
interesting one.
Yeah. So the one I was telling you about with surveying with Kevin Wasty, man, that guy he's sharp, and it's such a great like series of lessons, because like surveying is not technically A, E, or C, but it's so embedded in everything we do. And a couple of good lessons there are, like the fall and then rise again of like the surveying profession. other adjacent fields that are kind of coming into like what has been considered surveying's turf. You know, the rate of change of some of this technology and computing and how to keep on top of all of it, all of which I think are great lessons, because sooner or later we're going to be in engineering facing some of those same questions. So I like to think of it as it's a little peek into the future. I'd like to say, you know, if I think everybody in the industry wouldn't mind getting paid a little bit more. So I think it's a great, you know, it's a great profession that we have here, and hopefully we continue to see kind of demand for, you know, students coming out of school increase.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I might have to check that episode out here pretty soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else you want to share about? Or
no, I just want to say thank you again for having me on, taking the time. This has been great, and we'll look forward to the next one.
And you got a good LinkedIn profile as well?
Yeah, so you can look me up on LinkedIn, Nick Heim, PE. I'm sure that'll be in the show notes if anybody wants to take a peek. Like Andy said, I like to post stuff that I think people will find valuable, but I like to have a lot of fun, because if you're not having fun, what's the point?
Yeah, you got any good memes coming up?
Man, I gotta get back. I gotta get back on the train. Yeah.
All right, cool, man. What's your secret for finding a meme? Like, is there a trick to it?
So I go to imageflip.com, and I scroll through the most popular ones, and I'm like, because I draw everything from my own experience. Like I just look at stuff and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when I was like on site with that guy and he told me I was like a knucklehead, and then I like make the meme, you know what I mean?
So you were making them, like?
Yeah, I don't like I would say there's like one or two I maybe like grabbed from somebody else, but I'm kind of like, there's enough accounts out there that do nothing but repost other people's stuff, so I'm just gonna do it myself. And that's also a good life lesson, is like, by, you know, building that muscle, whether it be like writing or doing calcs or like whatever the case may be, making memes, like you're building that muscle and like giving your unique style or flair that people really enjoy. And like you can even see that on platforms like LinkedIn today. Everybody hates AI generated comments and posts, right? And it all sounds the same, and there's no unique style or tone. So even with the advent of being able to do a lot of things at the snap of a finger, I still think there's value in like doing things yourself. It's just knowing, I think, you know, the Eisenhower matrix, right? Or maybe that's not the word, but like the high impact type stuff.
Right. I think that's what it is. Yeah.
And knowing what that is versus like the low effort, the high effort stuff that's low impact and just needs to be done.
Yeah.
There's better use cases there, I think. But when it comes to, you know, your persona, your brand, your messaging, there's nothing wrong with just doing it the old fashioned way.
Yeah. And maybe a young engineer or old AEC professional, I mean, should they be posting on LinkedIn?
I think to answer that question, you need to know, like I said, like, what is your purpose, right? So if your purpose is to connect with like an audience that just doesn't use LinkedIn, I'd recommend you go find like where your audience lives.
Right.
If you're trying to, let's say I know a couple people who use LinkedIn, not to find clients, but to recruit, you know, I think that's probably a good idea. You'd just be well served to understand, like, is the niche you're hiring in actually on LinkedIn, right? Like there's nothing wrong with, you know, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. Like it's just finding where your audience is.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was a bit of a segue, but figured I'd ask, and appreciate your time today, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
my pleasure.
And hope you enjoy the rest of the good weather here.
Yes, sir.
All right,
go out,
everybody.
Yes, sir.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to today's episode of Enhance, and please leave a like, a subscribe, or a follow,